Hey folks, Todd here. Today we're going to install the WingMate modular rear bumper from Rugged Ridge on this Jeep Gladiator. Now I do want to point out this particular unit has been installed on a few different Gladiators and it has been tested, so you're going to see some marks. The tools I'll be using for this installation are a 1/4 and 3/8 ratchets with extensions, a 10mm, 13, 18, 19, and 21mm sockets, 8, 10, 13, 15, 17, 18mm wrenches, and a 15/16 wrench, a crescent wrench, needle nose pliers, 4mm and 5mm Allen wrenches, number 3 Phillips head screwdriver, a dead blow mallet, a grease gun and bearing packing tool, and thread locker. Let's go ahead and get started. Starting off, we have the plastic factory bumper already removed along with a spare tire and factory tow hooks. If you have the Rubicon edition, you'll want to also remove the bedside rock rails too, along with their brackets that go up to the frame. This is the back side of the bumper. Now, if you have reverse sensors, you can go ahead and port them over now. The mounting locations are keywayed for the sensors here, and included provisions are provided to install them in place. We do not have sensors, so we're going to install these rubber plugs instead. Next, we can go ahead and port over the factory trailer receptacle. It just snaps right in from the front. Now we're going to install our frame horn reinforcement bracket, which will provide significant increase over the factory strength. These are size specific, so make sure the rounded tab matches the rounded frame horn. We're going to insert the provided hardware over the top where the tow hook came out. We're going to attach the flange nuts from the bottom. Now before we tighten those, we're going to go ahead and temporarily attach the same hardware over the frame horn holes. Now we're going to go ahead and tighten up the top bolts with an 18mm on the top and a 21mm on the bottom nut. Now we can go ahead and remove that temporary frame horn hardware and go ahead and repeat the same thing on the opposite side. If you have cube lights, install those now before you put on the bumper. Also, we went ahead and taped off the corners to protect the paint while we place the bumper. Next, have a friend help you hold it in place while you line up the holes in the bumper with the holes in the frame horn brackets. Okay, now we're just going to keep this hardware hand tight for now until we can get everything aligned. All right, now if you have the factory reverse sensors, you can go ahead and hook those up now and get the wire harness tied off. We don't have that, so we're going to go ahead and move to this trailer receptacle and go ahead and pop that back into place. Here's the driver's side wing that protects the bed. Now make sure it's oriented so that the wider side faces the bumper and the narrow end faces the front. Now before we set this in place, we'll need to insert carriage bolts into these 2 lower square holes and install flange nuts just hand tight, because it's not going to be able to fit in place once we get this underneath the truck. All right, now to get this in place, we're going to start by inserting the folded end over our exhaust, and then we're going to fit it up, the front end first. It will slide in between the bumper and the plastic fender, and then as we're rotating it up, we're going to go ahead and work our carriage bolts through the square holes in the wing into the holes in the bumper. We're going to go ahead and put the serrated flange nuts on the other side, get those threaded into place, keep them hand tight for right now. All right, now here is our box side protection frame bracket. These are also side specific, and this oval hole will be offset towards the bottom. The box leg is going to angle towards the rear. Now to get it in place, first you're going to put the C side in above the exhaust and then work it around so that it wraps around the frame and the box leg reaches back to the bumper wing. All right, once you have it wrapped around the frame, you're going to slide it forward into the hole. The oval hole is going to line up to the threaded hole in the frame. All right, next we're going to insert our M10 bolt with a flat washer into that threaded hole until it's hand tight. All right, so now make sure that the round hole in the bottom is lined up to the hole in the frame, and take your extra long bolt with washer and run it up all the way through to the top of the frame and install the serrated flange nut hand tight on top. Now we need to lift the bumper wing so that we can slide another carriage bolt through the top hole. All right, next what we're going to do is remove the flange nuts from the 2 lower carriage bolts so we can slide over our retainment reinforcement bracket. All right, now here is our reinforcement bracket. We're going to slide it over top of those 3 carriage bolts and then reattach the serrated flange nuts. Just hand tight for right now. All right, now we're going to take one of our medium length bolts with a washer and run it through the frame bracket from the back side to the front, go through the reinforcement bracket and install a flange nut hand tight on that side. All right, now we're going to line up the 2 holes up on top and take our 2 medium length bolts with washer and run them down from the top down through the holes in the bottom of that box frame bracket. All right, when we have the bolts coming down through the hole, we're going to go ahead and install a flange nut on the bottom of each one of those bolts. All right, now before we tighten all this up, we're going to go ahead and repeat the same process on the opposite side. Of course, we don't have an exhaust over there, so it's going to be a lot easier. We'll start by tightening the wing to the bumper, make sure it's lined up, and then tighten it up the top and bottom flange nuts with an 18mm. Now we can go to the hardware on the frame. We'll use a 17mm on the side of the frame and 18mm on top and bottom of the frame where the long bolt is going all the way through. Next, we can tighten the wing to the frame bracket using the 18mm on top and on bottom. All right, now we can go ahead and tighten down the bolt holding the frame bracket to the reinforcement bracket. It's an 18mm on both sides. And last, we can go ahead and tighten down the 3 carriage bolts with the flange nuts that are holding the reinforcement bracket to the wing. Also an 18mm. All right, we're going to go ahead and tighten down the bumper to the frame horn. Those bolts will require an 18mm on the bolt side and a 21mm on the nut side. All right, now here we are on the driver's side rear of the bumper. You're going to notice we've got a large hole on top next to a couple of small holes. Now those are going to match right up to our tap plate. This is our tap plate. Now you'll notice we've got a couple of recessed holes in the tap plate that will line up to those smaller holes. Now you'll also want to take a look. These are side specific. They've got 2 notches on the tap plate. Those need to be facing away from your tailgate. If they're facing kind of towards the tailgate, you got the wrong side. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the hardware. I've got a ratchet with a 10mm on a long extension. I'm going to go ahead and take one of the serrated flange nuts and put it into the 10mm socket. Then I'm going to lift that up from the bottom of the bumper and we're going to line it up to the hole. Because I can right now look down through the bumper and through the tap plate and line that up. And I'm going to take my Allen head bolt and drop it down through the recessed hole and line it up to that nut and get it started. All right, we're going to do the same with the other side, and once we get both sides started, we can go ahead and tighten them down. We'll be using a 4mm Allen wrench on the top to get them all tightened down. All right, now we're going to go ahead and find our spindle. Now you'll notice on the spindle it is notched at the bottom. So you're going to find that notch on the bottom, and that's going to line up to a spot in the bumper that's keywayed. So we're going to go ahead and drop that down through the hole. That notch needs to face towards the front of the vehicle. And go ahead and twist the spindle, make sure that it's locked into that keywayed position. All right, now that it's locked in, you're going to have a large bolt with a washer. You're going to want to put a drop of blue thread locker on that and then go ahead and put it up through the bottom of the spindle and get it nice and tightened down using a 24mm. All right, now let me go ahead and show you the process of packing the bearings. We've already done that. We're going to show you how that goes. Okay, now in your kit for each swing arm, you're going to have 2 bearings, one that's larger, one that's smaller. The larger one is going to go to the bottom, the smaller one goes to the top. We're going to go ahead and pack the larger one first. Now, you can do this by hand. Basically, what you do is you put a bunch of grease in the palm of your hand, and then you run that through and just roll everything through. You just want to make sure you work all the grease up through to where it comes out the top. What we're going to do is we're going to use a grease packing tool. You can get these at any part store that you go to. What you're going to do is just kind of drop this in place, and then this one Comes up to the top and it screws on. Make sure you have that bearing nice and centered in there. And now what we're going to do is take a grease gun, make sure it snaps into place here, and we're going to start applying grease to fill in the cavity. It's going to press that grease all the way through the bearing. All right. Also like to make sure that you got plenty of grease run into all the outside of the bearings. Now we're going to go ahead and do the top bearing the exact same way. All right, now we're going to go ahead and take a little bit of the excess grease that we've got and then put it down into the race. And just need to put a little bit in there, get a nice little seal going, or a nice little thin coat. Then grab our larger bearing. We're going to drop that into place. Make sure it goes in nice and straight. And once that's in, we're going to take our seal. The grooved end goes down first. And once that's in there, we're also going to want to take, I'm just going to take a socket that's about the size of the seal and just tap it. Get nice and seated in place. All right, now we're going to go ahead and take our swing arm over to the spindle. Now we're going to be very careful not to bump our tail light or the paint on the back of the Jeep. Go ahead and slide it down in place. You might have to wiggle it around a little bit to get everything lined up. But once it drops down, then we're going to go ahead and insert our top bearing. That's our smaller bearing in our kit. We want to have the taper side down. We want to make sure that fits down in there and wiggle the swing arm back and forth a little bit, make sure it gets down in there. And go ahead and drop down your black washer on top of it as well. All right, now make sure you take note of where the hole is in your spindle, because you're going to need to put the cotter pin through there after the castle nut is on. So go ahead and put the castle nut on with the castle side up. And get it as hand tight as possible by wiggling the swing arm back and forth as it's tightening it up, just so you can get it as tight as possible by hand. All right, now one thing you'll notice if I wiggle this up and down a little bit, there's going to be a little bit of play. What we want to do is we want to tighten the castle nut down enough to where there's no play, but that it swings freely without restriction. So let's go ahead and tighten that up and get the castle nut lined up with a hole. Then we can insert a cotter pin. All right, and go ahead and grab a pair of pliers and lock down that cotter pin. All right, now we're going to go ahead and swing the swing arm gently to the closed position up against the tailgate. What that is going to do is that's going to expose our hole on the side of the sleeve that goes around the spindle. Next, you're going to find your cap, the spindle cap. Now that's going to have a recessed hole in the side of it that's going to line up. Make sure you get the correct side. So if you rotate that cap over, we're going to see the Rugged Ridge logo. Make sure that Rugged Ridge logo is visible when you set the cap on. So go ahead and set the cap in place, and then you're going to find your Allen head bolt. It's going to go through the side. And you're going to go ahead and tighten that down with a 4mm Allen wrench. All right, now we're going to go ahead and swing our swing out open. Go ahead and pull the pin up so we can miss that first stopping location. And we're going to get it to the all the way open lock position, and then we can go ahead and install our bump stop. Now these are side specific, but they only go on one way, so just go ahead and line it up. If it does need to be adjusted, you're going to need to use the included shims between the rubber and the swing arm. But we're going to go ahead and put it on right now, make sure everything goes on. So what we're going to do is bring up our U-clip. Now the U-clip is going to give us some threads that go back behind that square hole. We're going to slide that in place until it clicks in place. It is tight, so you're going to have to work that in. All right, now we're going to go ahead and raise our bump stop in place. Use a provided bolt with washer and go through and get the threads lined up. We're going to use a 4mm Allen wrench to get that started. And once we get the thread started, we're going to go ahead and grab our other bolt with washer and go up through the top. Then we're going to put a washer on top, followed by a nylock nut. All right, we're going to hold that nylock nut with a 10 millimeter and tighten it down with that 4 millimeter Allen wrench. Make sure you do not over tighten this because you don't want to deform the rubber. You just want to get it nice and snug. And then get both of those tightened up. All right, now we're going to go ahead and grab our latch out of our kit. Now, it comes with 2 carriage bolts for the latch. We're going to take the larger of the 2 carriage bolts and insert it into the side of the latch, through the square hole. All right, and then on the other side, we're going to install our serrated flange nut and get that on there just finger tight for right now. All right, and then our smaller carriage bolt, we're going to take and bring in from the front side of the latch into, to the inside of the latch. And it's going to kind of come between those 2 springs. So one of those springs is not attached, so let's go ahead and bring that through the square hole. This is a side that is adjustable, so we're going to get this set in place where we think we need it, but we can adjust it later as needed. So we're going to go ahead and put the other carriage bolt on that and get that snugged down. Once they're both lined up, we can snug them both down. All right, we're going to use a 13 millimeter on the smaller one and a 15 millimeter on the larger carriage bolt. All right, now they're both snugged up. We're going to go ahead and use a pick tool and attach the spring to the latch. So now we're going to go ahead and install our latch guide. Now, when I hold this up, you're going to see we've got a flat spot up top and the taper is on the bottom. Also, if I flip it sideways, you're going to see that we've got a notch. That notch is going to point back to the latch mechanism inside the bumper. So we're going to go ahead and slide that in. Once we slide that in, the hole in the latch guide is going to line up to the hole in the top of the bumper. So we're going to take our provided screw, which is an Allen head screw, and go ahead and put that through there and kind of get it started. And then once that's started from the bottom, we're going to install a flat washer along with our nut and get that threaded onto the Allen head screw. And once we get that connected, we're going to tighten it down with a 10 millimeter on the nut side and a 4 millimeter Allen wrench on the top side. Don't over tighten it. You just want to get it nice and snug. All right, now let's go ahead and test the latch operation. We're going to go ahead and move this over. Now check out how the latch mechanism works. We're going to squeeze that with the springs. We're going to go ahead and line up the latch mechanism to the pin and then push it in place and give it a nice push and lock it, and there we go. We're locked in place. If you've got the passenger side, go ahead and install that one the exact same way. All right, now we've got the spare tire carrier. This is the base portion of it that installs first. Now note the orientation is going up. Now you can install this onto the swing out arm at any place depending on what size tire that you're going to be running with. We're going to go ahead and install it at the very top location. And I do have the swing out pulled out just so you can see exactly how everything goes on both sides. But what we're going to do is go ahead and put our hardware through the carrier into the swing arm and then attach the serrated flange nuts on the back side. I like to start with the bottom ones first because it's easier to get them lined up. And then when we tighten down the hardware, we're going to tighten it down with 18 millimeter tools. So we'll have an 18 millimeter socket on the bolt side and hold the nut side with an 18 millimeter wrench. And do the bottoms and also the 2 bolts up at the top. Okay, now your extension piece is going to slide right over top of the base piece. Now that is adjustable based on whether or not you have a really wide tire or an aggressive offset, but you're going to want to make sure you adjust it specific for yours. Go ahead and insert the hardware. We've got a bolt that you're going to run the bolt through the slotted hole and then a nut on the other side. And once you have everything in place, you're going to tighten everything down again with 18 millimeter on both the nut and the bolt sides. All right, now we can go ahead and close our swing out, install our tire, and make any adjustments necessary. Okay, now for the camera relocation, we're going to start off with the tailgate down. You're going to notice we've got an access panel in the tailgate. It's held in by 4 screws. Those are T30 screws. So we're going to go ahead and remove all 4 of them with a T30 Torx bit. All right, now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a fastener removal tool and remove this fastener that holds the harness kind of in place. We want a little bit more slack with the harness, so we're going to get that out of the way. Next, let me show you how to remove the camera harness. So what we're going to do on the opposite side of the harness, where it plugs in, there's a little tab. We're going to push on that and pull out. So here's where that tab is. You're going to push down on. Sometimes it's helpful to kind of push in a little bit to the camera before you pull out to disengage it. Now we're going to go ahead and push that off to the side. And this clip that goes around here, what we need to do is we're going to pry away on both sides of the clip out and then slide it back. And that whole clip slides out from the housing. Now we've got another little tab up on the top side of the housing. We're going to push in on that tab. Now make sure you're holding on to the camera on the other side of the tailgate because it's going to pop right out the other side of the tailgate. Let's go ahead and take it over to tabletop and remove the camera. Okay, now before we get started here, I want to make sure that we keep the orientation proper on here so we don't have the camera installed upside down. So up here at the top, this is the top of the camera housing. Make sure you keep in mind the orientation there. So the way this is going to come apart is we're going to take a 1/16 Allen wrench and we're going to take out these 3 screws. All right, now we're going to very gently pull the camera housing apart. Now this camera is out of a 2024 model, so it's a little bit different from some of the earlier models. So as we pull that apart, you'll notice that on the camera housing itself, it does not have any holes on the sides. Earlier models would actually be able to line up to the holes we have in the plates that we're going to be attaching it to. So we're just going to be sandwiching it between the 2 plates. So we've got the top plate, it's going to go over top of the camera housing, and the bottom plate is going to come up from the bottom, and the holes in the top and bottom plates are going to line up. So what we're going to do is take our carriage bolts from our kit and run down through those square holes in the top plates and go through the bottom plate. Once both of them are in and seated in, we're going to hold those in place and flip it over. And then from the bottom, well, as we hold it, we're going to go ahead and put on the hardware. We've got flat washer and nut that we're going to put on there. And we're going to draw them down for right now. Don't worry about getting them tight just yet. All right, now once we get both of those bolts just kind of drawn down, we want to make sure that camera is nice and centered in. Now, obviously, if this is one that has the holes in there, we don't have to worry about it getting it centered. But this one, we're just sandwiching together. Make sure that both of those are drawn down with a 7mm. All right, now we're going to go ahead and flip this over. And you'll notice that on the bottom of the bottom plate, you've got a slotted hole or a square hole. What you're going to do is you're going to line that up to our mount that goes up to the Jeep. You notice we got a slotted hole on the bottom of that. So we're going to go ahead and insert this in and get it lined up to that slotted hole. All right, now once those are in and lined up, we're going to take our carriage bolt and go down through the top and let the head of the carriage bolt seat into that square hole. Then hold that in place as you flip it over and put on the flat washer, lock washer, and nut. But before you tighten down that nut, make sure the camera is nice and lined up perfectly to the hole. All right, and we're going to go ahead and snug that down also with a 7mm. All right, now we can go ahead and take it over to the Jeep. All right, let me go ahead and show you the harnesses we're dealing with here. Now, these were taped together. In my left hand, I've got the camera harness, and in my right hand, this is the harness that goes to your door, the tailgate lock. So we've already separated that with a bunch of tape. We did that off camera because it's just removing tape. But we removed that tape all the way back to beyond the tailgate over here to this little panel. So let me go ahead and open up this panel. We're going to pull back on a little lever and then pop that open. So you'll see the harness for the camera comes all the way back to here. That's all you have to remove it back to. So we're not going to pull that apart. We're just going to pull the camera harness through and get it through that little trapdoor opening to get it down below the bed of the truck. And then once we have that through there, we can just go ahead and put that trap door back in place. Okay, now this is our cover plate. This is going to cover up that hole that is created because we removed the housing for the camera. Now this is going to come up from the bottom side of the tailgate. And what we're going to do is we're going to feed that up through there. Make sure that it is nice and straight. And now we've got the bracket that's going to go on the back side of it. We're just going to place that bracket in place, kind of keep it as like an X shape. And now you'll notice that the threads aren't quite coming through there because it's got a little bit of a spring loadedness to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our serrated flange nut and set it over top of that. And we're going to take our 10mm socket on an extension, and we're going to kind of bear down to get the threads started onto the post. Now, before you completely tighten it down, make sure you got it nice and straight. You might want to lift your tailgate and just double check, make sure it's straight, and then go ahead and snug it up. Definitely don't need to over tighten it. You just want to get it nice and snug. All right, now we're going to go ahead and replace our cover plate from the factory. Just going to put that back on there and reinstall the 4 T30 Torx bolts. All right, now we're going to go ahead and work that camera cable between the bumper and the tailgate and go ahead and plug it into our camera in the housing. Once that's locked into place, we're going to go ahead and install it with the included hardware into the license plate holes. Now, we would also be installing a license plate here. We don't have that with us right now, so we're just going to go ahead and install this for the sake of the video. All right, we're going to go ahead and snug it on down. Well, there you have it. That concludes the installation.